Hello, welcome to the third episode of the Church Hut series. Over the last couple of weeks, we spoke about a couple of things, part of which being that you are someone who experienced hurt in the church, right? And the reason why you experienced hurt in the church, in fact, the reason why you went into the church in the first place is because you were, of course, running away from something in the world, maybe some sort of pain, some sort of trauma, right? And you went into the church for safety, right? It may not be the major reason, but it could have been one of the reasons. Part of the reasons was because you wanted to feel loved and accepted in the church. But you got an exact or opposite feeling of that. And so what did? You withdraw because you've experienced church hurt. And when you try to look at it from your perpetrator's point of view, that's the person who hurt you. Before, of course, let's say he became a spiritual leader or he became a pastor, he was just someone like you who was imperfect, by the way, wanted to serve God, got into the church and was appointed a spiritual leader, be it a pastor or whatever. He was still learning to get the full glimpse of God. Therefore, he was still imperfect, and his imperfection was what hurts you. And today we'll try to explore deeper on how you can chase your healing, or how do you get through these hurts that you feel. The last couple of weeks, I actually gave you fictional characters, but I want to spice things up. Let's make things juicy. So I'm going to give you a real life story, but of course, I'm going to change the name of the person. Obona is a man that just wanted to serve God, and so he got into the church. He was seeing some good money. He was helping the church. You know, when you're seeing money and you're helping to the church, that it catches the pastor's attention. And so the pastor wanted to get to know him. That relationship he got with the pastor made him feel kind of special, especially when the pastor is trying to ask your opinion on some things, right? Of course. He went as far as when pastor is preaching, pastor is saying things like, if you're just giving 10%, you are just starting. Me, I give 20. Things like that. And then Obona says, pastor, if you can give 20%, I'll double your own and add 10% to it, or give 50%. In fact, he was so committed that when it was time to go for NYC, there was a church program. And so he missed the first day of NYC, that's the camp, and went the second day and was told to wait till the next batch. That was his level of commitment. And slowly, he realized something. His usefulness was dropping. The relationship between him and his pastor was now like directly proportional to him and his money. So as the money was going down, him and the pastor were going down in terms of vibe. Obona had a girlfriend. She had her struggles. She had, sexual temptations and all of that. Some sort of addictions. And so she goes to meet this pastor. And she tells the pastor that I'm having these struggles, I'm having these temptations. And the first thing the pastor says is, end that relationship. And next thing, there are rumors or there's news or something that the pastor begins to date her. Obona then has a sister who gets into a car accident where her hand is almost amputated. So it's that serious. Her hand is almost amputated, and he's always in the hospital, and not even a call from the pastor. And of course, all he can put together at the pieces, I lost my money, you made my baby leave me. That's all he can see. So many expectations not met. In fact, a lot of trauma encountered, a lot of pain, a lot of hurt encountered. He feels all of these things. And what does he say? He says, you know what? Maybe I'm better off not being a part of this community. And he stayed that way for a couple of years. And then after a couple of years, subtly, I started observing and noticing that the pain started reducing. He started being able to let go. He started even making excuses for the people that hurt him. He started trying to see different points of views. And there was something else I noticed. That was the same period he found, some preachers' sermons, and he would watch them and he would drown himself in them, right? And this particular preacher was so focused on the gospel of grace, how evil we are, how much evil we've done, and how much of God's grace was made available for us. And so in that, he understood the evil of man, the evil heart of man. He understood the wickedness of man, and he also understood God's grace to provide or make provision against that evil in man. And he just basically redefined his own perspective. We are going to be using Obona's story to buttress a couple of points. 1, how he was able to forgive. 2, how he was able to let God heal him. 3, the personal steps that he took to ensure that that healing took place. When we hear the word forgiveness, there's this thing that happens to us. Our mind just shuts down. I mean, how can I forgive? Do you know what he did to me? Do you know why? Do you know what I went through? Now, if the word forgiveness had to exist, it would be because something bad was done to you. Seneca once said this. Seneca, by the way, was a Roman Stoic philosopher who existed, from 4 BC to something AD or so. Now he said this. He said that anger does more harm than the event that caused the anger, and bitterness usually holds us more than the actual hurt that produced that bitterness. Now, what was he trying to explain? Because guess what? If I hurt you, I don't know I hurt you. I'm going to wake up the next day. I'm going to be living my life, trying to achieve my goals, trying to get things done. You're the one that is going to have some sort of burden placed on your shoulder. You're the one that is going to feel like you're overwhelmed. The bitterness that you have held is causing you more harm than the actual event itself. You realize that we have come to the conclusion that holding on to pain causes you more harm, especially when the guy that hurt you is really just living his life, not remembering he hurt you. Secondly, let's move to the next point. Children just think about themselves, think about what they want. I attended my friend's wedding a couple of months ago, and he has a niece. We were playing and she was hitting with me. And then I noticed something, because I love to play a lot, especially with kids too. The more she hits me, the more I try to, react in pain, of course playfully, because she's just 2 and she's incapable of causing any serious harm. And so the more she hits me, the more I react to pain, playfully of course. And so I realized that my reaction to pain in a playful manner made her more joyful that I was in pain. And then another person came and she hit the person, and the person was like, what is this one doing? Like, what's wrong with you? And when she realized that this person didn't respond in pain, she felt disappointed. And so you realize that even 2-year-olds, of course they don't know anything. There's some sort of psychopathic traits that are in them. You also realize that when you step into schools, primary schools, you realize that there's a lot of emphasis on do not bully, at least in the Gen Z generation. Popular psychologist Jordan Peterson would say that when you put 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds in the same room, you would notice a hierarchy of strengths. And usually the strongest people would want to shut the weakest ones up. And so you would ask yourself, who teaches these young kids, evil like this? But you would realize that a lot of us, have some sort of traits, in quote and unquote, imperfections that expresses itself in evil ways. It's the same thing that happens in our country. We criticize our leaders a lot, but when you step into the average Nigerian shoes, the average Nigerian is happy when things go in way at the expense of another person, provided that it's in his own favor. You see people criticizing, people in power, but when it comes for their own person to get into power, they don't mind the corruption because they know that it's going to favor them. And so you realize that there is evil in both the people at the top, both people are below. The only difference is that the people at the top have been given a platform to express their evil on a wider scale. And it's the same thing with influence, not just in government, but also in the church. You have people trying to learn God's ways, trying to learn to be good, and then they step into power. Of course, they will hurt people. And guess what? We are not any better, right? You might be a decent person in a lot of ways, but there is that one way whereby if people saw you for, people will judge you for. Now, what's the grace of God, right? The grace of God, in a summarized version, the fact that God understands that, you are failed, you are imperfect in all your ways, right? And because you are a sinner, right? Because you have your imperfections, there is a judgment that sits over your head. Because of course, if you're a murderer in the court of law, you must pay for your sins, right? The court must sentence you to die or to spend the rest of your life in prison. And so if God is to judge rightly, then you must pay for your sins. But God says, you know what? Let me send someone else in your stead. You don't deserve my mercy, you don't deserve my forgiveness, you don't deserve my justice, but justice must happen. And so that's what God's grace is. The fact that you don't deserve it, so I'm bringing it for you. I had a pastor once that said something that hit me. He said that Hitler was responsible for the death of 6 million Jews. And not just, Jews. He was responsible for the death of a lot of other Europeans, for the death of some of his own people. But he said something profound. He said, if Hitler had repented before he died, he would have made heaven. That's what the gospel is. It's not to those that deserve it. It is to anyone who is ready to receive it. And so, which is why God is able to forgive both the good and the bad and the ugly. Because if God is to be just, then he must apply his mercy to everybody. Another point to note is to pray to God to heal you. I came across something once. A woman said something so profound that I can remember so well. Say a lot of us believe in God for miracles that have to do with physical illness. So for instance, I get blind today. Of course, I'll pray to God to heal my blindness. But we forget that the same God that heals our physical predicaments is the same God that can heal our emotional predicaments. And that's because God cares about how we feel too. A quick example. Do you know that in the Bible there was a leprous man who had not been with his family for say a couple of years? And this man then, because Jesus was teaching on the mountain, and then Jesus finishes teaching, going somewhere to the next city or so. And then this man approaches Jesus and he tells Jesus that if it's your will that I may be clean. And then Jesus Christ says, it's my will, right? And before Jesus Christ speaks the word to heal him, he touches him. Now, very important note, this man had not experienced a physical touch from someone who wasn't leprous in the last number of years. He would have experienced feelings of rejection because of that, feelings of I'm not good enough. But because just before Jesus Christ healed him, he touched him. Now, what psychological effect do you think that would have had on the man? Imagine you were in his shoes. Would you feel like this person loved me enough and accepted me enough to touch me before healing me? You can't downplay the fact that his psychological effect would have been heightened even just before the healing. And so you'd realize that God cares for you, cares about how you feel. And so it's off the back of this knowledge that you can be confident that when you come to him crying about how you feel, how you've experienced what you've experienced and how it has made you turn out, how much of a mess you are, how much hurt you're experiencing, you can have the confidence that God understands, God cares, and God is willing to heal you. And so when you pray that prayer asking for healing, pray it with confidence. Lastly, it helps to talk to someone about how you feel. Find closure. Talk to someone you trust, that hears you, that listens to you, that makes you feel seen, that makes you feel heard. Express how you feel and pour out your heart to the person. It also helps. Now, if finding justice, that's if it was a crime, if finding justice also helps you heal, please do that. Very important. These are some of the steps that my friend took, right? He didn't find justice, but anyway, but these were some of the steps that he took that helped him through his healing process. And I just thought to bring it to help you also go through this healing process in a practical manner. And I sincerely hope that this helps at least up to 50%. Next week, we'll be talking about, now that you're healing or you've begun your healing process, is it necessary to even go back to the church, or can I just serve God at home? I really don't want any of this unnecessary church thing. Can I just serve God by myself? And we'll explore more on this next week. Thank you for staying so far. Bye.